Imagine it's 11 o'clock at night. The garage smells like motor oil, like warm metal slowly cooling down, and like something vaguely electrical that doesn't have an exact name. Your hands are black up to the knuckles. A radio plays softly in the corner, some station you didn't quite consciously choose. Inside the house, the lights went out a long time ago. Most people would see someone who can't manage their time, who should be sleeping, who has a problem with priorities. But something else is happening in that garage. Something that has nothing to do with cars. This reveals something fascinating about a very specific type of human mind. And once you understand it, you will never look at that garage the same way again. Personality psychologists have spent decades studying a trait called conscientiousness. People who score high in this trait have a particular relationship with meticulous manual work. It's not that they enjoy effort for effort's sake, it's that they need the external world to reflect their internal world. Researcher Jordan Peterson has described these individuals as people who impose order onto chaos almost compulsively, and not as pathology, but as vocation. The man working on his car at night is capable of spending 40 minutes searching for the correct metric bolt because using the wrong one would feel, at some deep level, morally unacceptable to him. It's not neurotic perfectionism. It's integrity applied to objects. Why at night? That's the first question worth asking. Psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi described in the 1980s a mental state he called flow. It's that moment when the challenge of a task and the skill of the person performing it align perfectly and time dissolves. The mental noise disappears. The work worries, the unfinished conversation, the unpaid bill, all of it falls away like dust. The late-night garage is, first and foremost, a machine for producing flow states. No interruptions, no notifications, no one asking anything of you, just the concrete, tangible, honest problem of making something work. And the mind, which spends all day fragmented across dozens of simultaneous tasks, finally unifies. It works whole toward a single thing that is rare in the contemporary world. And when you find it, you come back. You always come back. The night also works as a filter. The people who are in the garage at that hour aren't there because it's convenient. They're there because they need to be there. And that distinction between convenience and need is, psychologically, everything. But this is where it gets really interesting. There is a dimension to these nocturnal rituals that has very little to do with mechanics and a great deal to do with time. Personal time, not clock time. The cars these men restore, repair, or maintain are not random vehicles. They are a 1978 Chevrolet that belonged to a father, a Ford Mustang from the year a son was born, a Land Rover purchased the week a mother was diagnosed. Attachment researcher Mary Ainsworth documented how physical objects can become extensions of our most important emotional relationships. In adults, she called them transitional objects. The car doesn't carry people, it carries memory, and repairing it is, in a very literal sense, repairing something else, something that perhaps cannot be repaired any other way, something that doesn't appear in any repair manual. Think about someone who just lost their father and doesn't quite know what to do with that grief that is so physical, so concrete, so resistant to narrative. Or a person who just left a 20-year career and suddenly doesn't know who they are without that title on their business card. Or someone whose marriage has entered that cold zone where there are no longer arguments, but no real conversations either. For all of them, the garage becomes something close to a confessional. A place where the world has logic. Where if you tighten the right bolt, the piece fits. Where the problem has a solution. Where you are competent, even if the rest of the world made you feel the exact opposite today. The car doesn't judge you. The car just needs you to listen. And what does it mean, exactly, to listen to a car? Clinical psychology has a concept called internal locus of control, the belief that your actions directly affect the outcomes of your life. In an era where much of what happens to us seems determined by algorithms, global markets, decisions made by people we will never meet, and forces operating far above our heads, working with your hands on something mechanical is an almost political act. It is reclaiming agency. It is telling the world that there are still things that depend on you. Every time you diagnose a problem by the sound of the engine, every time you identify a leak before it becomes a breakdown, every time you hear something that no one else would hear, you are exercising a very ancient kind of power. The power to understand the world well enough not to be its victim. Philosopher Matthew Crawford, who left a PhD in philosophy to open a motorcycle repair shop in Richmond, Virginia, wrote about this in a way that has rarely been matched. There is a dignity in manual work that modern cognitive work cannot replicate. The car doesn't lie. It either works or it doesn't. There is no ambiguity, no perception management. No meeting to discuss whether the engine starts. It starts or it doesn't. And that binary, brutal, clean honesty feels, in this century of infinitely malleable narratives, almost subversive. But here is the curious thing. Many of these men admit, when they speak about it honestly, that they are not particularly interested in reaching the end, not in the way you might expect. The finished restoration, the perfect car, the completed project, carries something melancholic for them. Some confess they deliberately extend their projects, that they find another problem, that they decide to redo something that was already fine because the standard has mysteriously risen, because the state they are seeking is not the result, it is the process. They don't want to have the car fixed. They want to be fixing the car. And that distinction, seemingly small, says everything about what kind of happiness they are pursuing, and about how thoroughly modern society misunderstands that happiness by systematically confusing it with production. Positive psychology has a term for this: eudaimonia, the happiness that comes from flourishing, not from immediate pleasure. Aristotle described it 24 centuries ago, and modern researchers like Martin Seligman have confirmed it as a far more robust predictor of long-term well-being than any form of instant gratification. The man in the garage, who from the outside appears to be sacrificing his rest, is actually doing the precise opposite of sacrificing himself. He is choosing, with a clarity that very few people possess, the form of existence that most authentically belongs to him. How many of us can say the same at 11 o'clock at night? Psychologist Erik Erikson described a stage of adult development he called generativity, the deep desire to create something that outlasts your own life. To leave a mark that doesn't require your presence to keep existing. To pass on what you know before it disappears. Men who work alone in garages often speak, when asked, about wanting their children to learn, for someone to carry it forward, for the knowledge of how to work with your hands not to vanish in the next generation, which was born looking at screens and may never know what it feels like when something that was broken works again for the first time because of you. There is something deeply serious in that desire. Something the modern world doesn't always know how to recognize, but which exists with a gravity and an urgency that no productivity algorithm can correctly classify. These men are teaching us something we have almost entirely forgotten. That purpose doesn't always arrive in the form of a grand articulated mission. It doesn't always come with a name and an audience. Sometimes it arrives in the form of an engine that won't start and a man who decides at 11 o'clock at night that tonight he is going to find out why. That meaning doesn't need to be witnessed by anyone to be real. The garage door is down precisely because what happens inside is not designed to be observed. It is one of the last spaces left to the modern human being where social performance disappears entirely, where you don't have to appear to be anything, where you don't have to construct a presentable version of yourself. Just exist and do. That, in this moment in history, is a form of resistance. The soul needs, from time to time, a problem that has a solution, a task that has an end, a space where the body remembers that it also thinks, that it also feels, that it also knows things the mind cannot articulate with words, where the hands remember that they are intelligent. The late-night garage is that space. Not for everyone, never for everyone. But for those for whom it is so completely and so irreplaceably that the rest of the world, with all its speed and all its noise, cannot compete with that closed door and that bare bulb and that engine waiting. The next time you see light under a garage door at midnight, don't think of someone who can't sleep. Don't think of a time management problem. That is not just a man fixing a car. It is a human story about what we do when we need to become whole again, about the places we build to escape from everything, except ourselves, about what it still means, in this century, to know how to make something work with your hands and for that something to work.